what's up, guys? MugenLord here, and today I want to talk about Warner Brothers games. I know, like, almost a month ago or a couple weeks ago, we talked about multiverses and how that was wasted potential. I mean, how did you mess that up? How did you fumble the ball with that? So it got me wondering, like, what the hell is going on with Warner Brothers games, and what's going on with the management? Is there a way for them to pretty much fix this wreckage that's going on? Does there need to be some type of restructuring? So before we even dive into this article that I found was pretty interesting, make sure you hit the subscribe button, the notification bell for more game content here on this channel. So we're going to dive right into it. So it says Warner Brothers Games insiders blame recent struggles on exiting president's poor leadership, addiction to chasing trends. It would take 2 to 3 years to rebuild. And we start to see that a lot of that in the industry right now, where you have Square Enix and many other companies where you won't see the total restructure and the total rebuild of these games into the next 3 to 5 years or even a decade, because of all of the trends they've been chasing and even all of the DEI and them injecting so many of these type of principles into their company, where it's going to take a long time for them to actually restructure and gut these companies out to get it back on track. So we're going to dive right into it. It says that in the wake of President David Haddad's recent resignation announcement, and this, like I said, this article was a couple weeks ago, insiders at Warner Brothers Games are now opening up regarding their feelings towards their former boss, with many citing his lacks of decisive leadership in addition to trend chasing as one of the main reasons for the division's ongoing implosion. Yes, man, a lot of it has to do with poor management. Yes, we always talked about when it came to the culture war space, wokeness, DEI and stuff, but also a lot of this has a lot to do with greed from these executives and just poor management, and then allow these executives to fail upwards. They will cut everybody else out. People who develop these games, people that had to suffer through crunch time and everything because of the executives and their bad choices in the leadership, and the leadership stays while everybody else get cut. And that's where most of the major problems are coming from. So it says, speaking with and having their concerns subsequently relayed to the public by Bloomberg's Jason Schreier as part of his recent report on the studio's internal turmoil, said insiders described Haddad's tenure as one of confusion and frustration, all of which resulted in a string of back-to-back failures in the form of Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League, trash, Harry Potter, Quidditch Champions. I'm not a Harry Potter fan, so I don't really care about that. And then, of course, multiverses. I think out of all three of these games, multiverses was the one that I was really, really disappointed in. How did they fumble that ball? If you haven't seen that video, I definitely encourage you to go check that out as well. But to move on, it says, I quote, "So some who work closely with the veteran executive, the news of Haddon's exit didn't come as surprise, summarized by Schreier. Their only question was why it took this long." So that means everybody within the studios themselves saying, yo, why is this guy removed? Get this guy the hell out of there. And I'm telling you right now, what's going on in the West and the many of these studios going on in the gaming industry today, a lot of it also has to do with, there's a lot of infighting going on. There's like a war going on within these studios between passionate, developers who actually wants to make a good game, and then those who are caught up in this ideology that's going on within the company itself, and both are going back and forth fighting one another. So to continue, it says, thanks to his inability to properly guide the division and its bevy of IPs, a group of sources familiar with Warner Brothers Discovery business operation have admitted that the company now has, per Schreier, I quote, major gaps in its portfolio that will likely persist for the next year or two, particularly as they expect the Suicide Squad and Multiverse to continue generating significant revenue at least through the end of the year. So they are also telling you to be prepared that they still have other things that's cooking that is going to fail or somewhat fumble, but these games has already been in development. So there's going to be a 2-year cycle or a 2-year run before things somewhat gets better as they rebuild Warner Brothers Studios, game studios. And rather than the external market conditions being to blame for the poor performance of this trio of titles, Insiders have instead largely agreed that it was Haddad's own fumble that led to these digital disasters. I quote, according to interviews with 24 current and former Warner Bros. Employees, a lack of strong cohesive vision during Haddad's reign, a tumultuous period in which Warner Bros. Struggled through multiple reorganizations, led to years of ineffectual trend chasing and wasted development time. And that trend chasing is not just talking about gameplay, but also when it comes to corporate ethics, corporate social behaviors and everything that they've seen other studios doing that they wanted to implement as well. So that's also a trend that they wanted to chase as well, just to remind you of that, so you won't get that confused, because of course Jason Schreier won't say it. So it says Warner Bros. Umbrella have taken reputational hits, lost key staff members, and burnt through hundreds of millions of dollars. God damn. The Bloomberg reporter further detailed how, despite his career history of working for such developers as Vivida Games, Sierra Online, and Activision Blizzard, colleagues describe him as a polished executive who does not appear to spend much time playing video games himself, something subordinates occasionally found challenging as they tried to talk through the nuances of product decisions, with some staff having also griped that it could take months to receive answers to their questions on matters big and small, ranging from a studio's next game to whether they would participate in the annual E3 trade conference. And that's another thing, man. A lot of these executives, ever since gaming went mainstream, man, gaming is a multi-billion-dollar industry. So this also attracts a lot of executives who aren't gamers, but they like to invest and they want a return on their investment. So since they don't play games, they don't understand the culture of gaming, they don't understand the language of gaming, they don't understand the process or anything like that. So when you have studios or you have the staff that's within the studio themselves trying to explain these things to the executives, they don't understand at all. All they see is that, hey, we see this trend right here, it's working, we want you to do it. But they don't understand the significance and what goes into creating that particular trend. They don't understand the formula behind it. And that's what's going on here. And we need more executives who are actually gamers or have some knowledge of gaming. They don't have to be hardcore gamers, but they have to understand the business and the knowledge and at least some of the process that goes into this to know whether or not they're going to get a return on their investment. So it says said issues were only further exacerbated by Haddad's apparent lack of action, with subsidiaries like Gotham Knights, developer WB Games Montreal, and Wonder Woman studio Monolith Productions telling Schreier that they felt stuck in limbo as they waited for decisions from Haddad and his team. I quote, the executives in Burbank may have felt pressure to avoid making big calls at the time because the entire organization was beset with uncertainty, wrote Schreier. Shortly after Haddad started, the division's parent company was purchased by telecom giant AT&T Inc., triggering a lengthy antitrust trial, and then before long spun out to merge with Discovery Inc. And yes, that was a big period right there. And when these mergers and these talks happen, there's a lot of laws, regulations, they gotta check, in a case of monopolies, all these other type of things. So now they can't really make decisions right away because they don't know what the outcome is going to be when we have these mergers and these big acquisitions that are going to take place, and these people don't even know if they're going to be fired, if the project's going to be canceled. So there's a lot of things that's involved with this. It's a deep rabbit hole. So it says, in offering an example of Haddad's scattered leadership during this era, employees associated with WB Games Montreal recalled how his executive team, as led by VP of Production Ben Bell, were initially enthused when following the end of support for Gotham Knights. The studio approached them with an idea for a game based on DC's resident magical bastard John Constantine. It says, however, rather than working to swiftly establish the game's budget, development timeline, and overall scope, said executive team reportedly spent months dodging the issue. When they did finally get into contact with Bell threw the WB Games Montreal a curveball by instead suggesting that they should focus on a more recognizable character. Despite months, and that's the thing, we missed the era of taking risks and trying something different. Yes, Constantine is totally different than most of the DC characters. and they got upset. They got upset at the fact is that they couldn't make a Constantine game, but instead we have Bell saying stick to something that actually works, stick to something that people are familiar with because they are scared to take risks. So it said, despite months of wasted time, the studio acquiesced in doing so, pivoting from Constantine to the Scarlet Speedster himself, the Flash. Though sadly, thanks to the failure of the Heroes Ezra Miller solo film, this game was eventually canceled too. Putting a stamp on Schreier's recap of the situation at the time, former head of WB Games Montreal, Carrier, admitted to the reporter, I quote, there was a lot of going on politically within the organization at the time. The focus on games was perhaps lost a little bit. Even so, Schreier admittedly reports that over the past 2 years, most of Montreal's leadership have resigned. Not just because of the lack of new games, but also due to the frustration with their corporate bosses, according to people familiar with the events. Notably, though, Schreier allegedly reached out to Haddad's before publishing this article. The exec ultimately declined to offer any comments on his contents. Of course he did. He don't want to answer that shit because he know he at fault. However, while the main man himself may not have spoken to Schreier about the studio's current status, WBD, head of games at global streaming, JP Perriette, did. And though he avoided making any specific mentions of his colleague's name, he could not help but admit that the entire division was currently in a bad way. I quote, we'll get back to profitability in 2025. Perrette said, we won't get back to profitability. We want to get back in the next 2 to 3 years. It will take 2 to 3 years to rebuild, reset the levels we want to be at, but the bounce back is immediate as far as going from loss making to profitability. So yes, they won't pretty much be making tons and tons of profits in 2025, but the bounce back into them trying to get things into gear to head into profitability be much faster within the next 2 to 3 years. But what is this trend that's going on? A lot of these developers are getting sick and tired of their bosses, these corporate executives. That's why you see CD Projekt Red and a lot of the team had left and started their own studio and created their own game because no one wants to take chances anymore. They wanted to create a new game because they want to try something different. This is why you look at some of the main creatives behind Platinum Games had left and created Clover Studios, and we're going to start seeing this trend time and time again, that these developers who passionately want to make games are going to leave these studios that we have grown to know and love, and they're going to lead to create new studios that may end up leaving an impact in the gaming industry itself. So I definitely hear your thoughts in the comment sections below. What do you believe is going on in Warner Brothers Studios? Do you think is a lot of social, political issues that's going on within the studio that's causing a lot of these problems? Or do you think it's just pure incompetency when it comes to these executive decisions made by the top man at the top? Or is there a mixture of both? So definitely leave your thoughts in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, subscribe button for more gaming content here on this channel. This is MugenLord signing off. I'll see you game fiends later. Peace out.